Good morning, all Grade 10 Business Studies learners, and welcome to our webinar this morning. I am going to allow for 2 minutes just for everyone to get settled and signed in. So I'll be back with you shortly. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I can see there's still a few people trying to sign into the session. We will start very shortly. I'm just going to allow for a few more seconds just to get everyone signed in and comfortable for the session to start. Okay, I think we can start off the session. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I hope everyone is awake and ready to start off our first webinar session for today. Before we start, I would just like to introduce myself. My name is Bianca Nudia, and I'm the Education Specialist for Business Studies. I would also like to introduce the organizer of the session. Her name is Kimberly Britt. You will not be able to see her. She will just make sure that the session runs smoothly. And if, for instance, there is a drop in the internet connection, Kimberly will jump in to assist you. So thank you, Kimberly, for joining us as well. Okay, let's just cover some of the basic aspects for the session. So please just make sure, if you are struggling to hear me, make sure your audio is on and your speaker volume is turned up. You will be automatically muted when joining the session. So I will not be able to hear you. Should you have any questions, you can ask your question in the question box below. Or you can raise your hand. So you will see in your panel, on your panel, there's a hand icon. So I'm going to use that hand icon throughout the session just to make sure that you are following and that you're on the same page. So please make use of those hands when I ask you to do so. Okay, very important, learners. Download this presentation and additional resources in the handout box below or on your right. So just quickly, let's just pause there because this is a very important aspect of this presentation. Quickly look in your handout box. You will see there is a webinar Business Studies Grade 12 PDF, Grade 10 PDF document. Please make sure that you download this throughout the session. As if the session ends, this document will not be available. So please make sure that you do download this. There's a lot of important information that I'm going to share with you this morning. Okay, please remember to send us your questions. I am not going to answer any questions throughout the session, just to our time constraints that we do have. But please feel free to send me your questions if you are unsure about anything, and I will get back to you after the sessions. Okay. Just take note of this point. Attendees are encouraged to ask questions and leave comments. However, irrelevant or inappropriate comments will result in an attendee being dismissed from the session. If we do not get to your question, please send us an email to academics@impact.co.za, and we will attend to that specific question that we did not answer. And the questions, the overall questions that I'm going to receive after the session, I'm going to set up the answers for these questions, and I'm going to email all of you the answers to these questions, because a lot of the time the learners have the same type of questions, and therefore I think it's important that I answer all of those questions and provide the answers to you. If you do not receive this email with all the questions and the answers, please send us an email to info@impact.co.za. And finally, this recording of the session is available, will be made available on our Impact YouTube channel, okay? And I will provide you with the link later on in the session. Okay, can I quickly just see some hands? Can you put up a few hands? I just want to make sure that everyone is ready, you're settled in, and that we can start. So just click on your hand icon. Great, thank you so much. Okay, let's begin. So for today, we are going to discuss the following. I just want to close this panel. Here we go. I am quickly going to do a review on the content that we need to cover in term 2, and just check up on our weekly planning. Then we are going to look at what you need to know on the different forms of ownership. As you know, this session is dealing with forms of ownership. And we will be looking at important concepts and terminology relating to forms of ownership. We will also look at factors when choosing a form of ownership. And finally, we will work through questions based on forms of ownership. And these questions are the type of questions that you can expect in a test or in an examination. Okay, let's quickly look at the weekly planning I set up. So those of you who attended the first business studies lesson would remember that I set up a very basic weekly planning for you to follow. So let's just quickly open up the dates so that we can see where you are supposed to be now. So you are supposed to be done with contemporary socioeconomic issues, and you should almost be done with social responsibility. And this is the second chapter that you need to complete. So hopefully you have covered both of these chapters already. I would like to just mention that I'm not going to deal with entrepreneurial qualities this morning. Our lesson will only focus on forms of ownership. Okay, can I please get some hands? Are you following this weekly planning? Are you done with chapter 1 and chapter 2 of this term? Let me just see if you guys are following. Okay, I can see there's quite a lot of learners who are busy following this weekly planning, which is great, because we want enough time to prepare for examinations or upcoming tests. Okay, so that is our weekly planning for term 2. Please try to stick to this. If you are not where you're supposed to be, try to work a bit harder and catch up so that you are up to date and know exactly what we have to cover. Okay, grade 10s. I want you to take note of the following. So in grade 8 and grade 9 EMS, you also work through forms of ownership. Okay, so this information is not something that is completely new to you, and you would recall some of these forms of ownership. In grade 10, they've added forms of ownership to your knowledge that you gained in grade 8 and 9. So the forms of ownership that we need to know in grade 10 is a sole trader, a partnership, a closed corporation, a private company, and a public company. This is the forms of ownership that you would know by now, that you definitely covered in grade 9 EMS. And what is added to grade 10 is personal liability company, a state-owned company, a non-profit company, and a cooperative. Okay, so in total, there's 9 forms of ownership that you need to know coming into grade 10 and what will be expected from you to answer in exams. Okay, on the next slide, I summarized all the forms of ownership for you. So what you need to know about these forms of ownership in grade 10 is the following. You should be able to define the different forms of ownership. You should be able to list and discuss the characteristics of the different forms of ownership. You should be able to name the advantages and the disadvantages of the different forms of ownership. But with this, and it's not included on this slide, you should also be able to compare different forms of ownership and also differentiate between the different forms of ownership. Okay, and grade 10, I would like to make this very clear to all of you. Forms of ownership is dealt with in grade 10, 11, and 12. Okay, so if you lay a strong foundation in grade 10 and you really know the characteristics, advantages, and disadvantages, and the definitions in grade 10, you will find it much more easier to cope with in grade 11 and grade 12, where forms of ownership is also dealt with. So I want to invite all of you, or make sure that you spend enough time on this chapter to ensure that you really know this off by heart and that you are able to interpret and apply your knowledge. Because this is a chapter that will pull through to grade 11 and grade 12 as well. Okay, before I move on, is that clear? Do you understand that? Please put up your hand so that I can see that everyone is still following. Thank you. I can see quite a few hands being putting up. Okay. On the next slide, grade 10s, I want you to take note of the following. I have included the definitions, the characteristics, the advantages, and the disadvantages of all the different forms of ownership that we are going to deal with. Okay, so you will see I added the sole trader. We have a partnership, what should be mentioned in a partnership agreement. We have a closed corporation, a private company, public company, the differences between a private company and a public company. This is something that examiners really like to ask in an exam or in a test. So please make sure that you know this. Personal liability company, state-owned company, the reasons for establishing a state-owned company, non-profit company, and a cooperative. I've included all the definitions, the characteristics, the advantages, and the disadvantages of these forms of ownership for you. You are more than welcome to download these notes from this session and work through these summaries and have it as part of your study material when you are preparing on this chapter or when you're preparing for tests and examinations. For the Afrikaans learners, I will ensure that all of these summaries on the forms of ownerships are made available to you afterwards. So you can go and find the translated versions of these information on the guided learning platform. So I am busy with the translation of this, and I'll make it available to you as soon as possible. So this is a nice summary for you to have with you and to work through when you are working and preparing for an exam and test. I included this in the presentation so that you are able to download this, but I am not going to work through each and every form of ownership in detail. Okay. Very important, grade 10s, in order for you to understand forms of ownership, there are a few important concepts or terminology that you need to understand. And I'm just going to put on my drawing tools over here so that I can highlight important concepts. Okay, so when we look at important concepts, the first one refers to liability. Okay, liability refers to the state of being responsible for something. Okay, owners taking a responsibility when something goes wrong. Okay, under liability, there are three types of liability that you get. The first one is unlimited liability, limited liability, and lastly, joint and severally liable. Okay, that is the three main concepts that we get under the term liability. When we look at unlimited liability, and I'm just going to put off the highlighter and get the spotlight. I think that works a bit easier. There we go. Unlimited liability refers to owners will lose all their personal assets when the business cannot pay debt and is declared insolvent. Okay, so that refers to unlimited liability. And now you should go and take the different forms of ownership and you can see where this will be applicable, to which form of ownership this will be applicable. Then we get limited liability. Okay, owners will not lose personal assets when a business cannot pay its debt. So owners will not lose their personal assets. Okay, and that is referred to as limited liability. Joint and several liable means this implies that should one partner be liable for the whole debt, the partner may claim that the creditor shall hold each partner liable for his or her part of the debt. Okay, so that is very important. Please make sure that you're able to understand firstly what the meaning of liability is, very important, and then you should be able to distinguish between the three types of liability that you get. Okay, I would suggest grade things that you're going to work through each form of ownership. I just mentioned that now as well, and then go and look at the meaning of these types of liabilities and then link it to the correct form of ownership. Okay, and this is very important for you to understand this before you actually work through the detail when it comes to the different forms of ownership. Okay, so I just want to put off this spotlight for us to move on in the next slide. Okay, I see all of my highlighting skills has been copied to the next slide. Okay. Then the next one that we need to look at is continuity. Okay, and continuity means can a business continue if a member, a partner, or a shareholder dies? Okay, or is this gets a disability? I just want to erase these drawings. There we go. That looks a lot better. Okay, and with continuity, it's also divided into two types of continuity. You get limited continuity and unlimited continuity. Okay, let's first of all look at limited continuity. And this is very simply put, once the owner dies, the business will end or close down. Okay, that refers to limited continuity. When we look at unlimited continuity, this simply refers to when the owner dies, the business can still continue. Okay, so second important concept that we need to know of is continuity, and that you're sure that it is divided in two subsections, limited continuity and unlimited continuity. And once again, go and work through the different forms of ownership and go and find out and list the forms of ownership that has limited continuity versus unlimited continuity. Okay, grade 12, grade 10s, I'm mixing up the grades this morning. Can I just get a few hands? Can I just see if everyone understands the concepts of continuity and liability? Just see. Thank you so much. I can see that there's a clear understanding. Great, Sens. Please make sure that you send your questions in the question box below. Anything that you're uncertain of, anything that I'm explaining that is not clear and you want more information, please just raise your hand and add it to the question or type out your questions in the question box below. And I'll get to that at the end of the session. Okay, next up, we have legal entity. And this is the third and final concept that is really, really important for you to understand. Okay. A legal entity has legal capacity to enter into agreement or contract, assume obligations, incur and pay debt, and sue and be sued in its own right, and to be held responsible for its actions. Okay. When we look at the different types of ownership that one gets, if you have no legal entity, this means that the business is tied to its owners. Okay, they are seen as one. And these are usually applicable to a sole trader and a partnership. If a business is a legal entity, this means that the company stands on its own. And this includes all other forms of ownership. Okay, is that clear? A very important grade tends that you understand the concept of a legal entity. Okay, the same with continuity, the same with liability. If you understand these three concepts and you are able to distinguish between them, you will find understanding the different forms of ownership much easier. Okay, so please make sure that after the session, you once again go through the different forms of ownership, that you work through the important concepts, and that you link the different forms of ownership to these concepts. Okay, very important. This will be expected from you in grade 10, grade 11, and grade 12. So make sure that you know this already in grade 10 and that you don't have to cover these concepts in grade 11 and 12 again. Okay. So what I would like us to focus on now is just the following summary that I included on the concepts that I want to explain to you. So very shortly summarized, and when you are comfortable in explaining liability, continuity, and legal entity, you will understand this more clearly. Okay, so if a business has legal entity, let me just put on my highlighter, spotlight. If a business has legal entity, it means that they have limited liabilities and they have unlimited continuity. Okay, if a business has no legal entity, it means that they have unlimited liabilities and limited continuity. Okay, and this is something summarized very shortly for you, but I think it's an easy way to remember. Okay, has legal entity refers to limited liabilities and unlimited continuity. If a business has no legal entity, it refers to unlimited liabilities and limited continuity. Okay, keep that in mind, keep the summary with you for the rest of your FET phase, and I'm sure it will come in very handy. Okay, our next session slide refers to factors that we need to consider when choosing a form of ownership. So you will see that the characteristics, the advantages and the disadvantages of the different forms of ownership is based on these factors that we need to consider. And the factors that I'm talking about is, first of all, before we choose or consider a form of ownership, we need to look at how the business will be managed and controlled. And this can also refer to continuity. Okay. Secondly, who's going to contribute to the capital? Who bears the risk? Whether there is limited liability or unlimited liability. And lastly, how will the profits or losses be divided? Okay, great sense. This is content that examiners enjoy asking in papers, that they test learners on, to make sure that you are able to explain this. So this specifically refers to the factors when choosing a form of ownership. Okay, and I summarize it very shortly for you on this slide. Very important, take note of this. Question can be asked in grade 10, 11, and in 12. Okay, so let's form that basis, let's form that strong foundation based on forms of ownership. Okay. I included questions based on forms of ownership that I want to work through with you. And I specifically chose a scenario-based question. Okay, in grade 10, and while I was preparing for the session, I worked through various previous exam papers to see what type of questions they ask in grade 10 based on forms of ownership. And in most cases, it was scenario-based questions. And what I mean with scenario-based questions, I will provide you with the scenario, and the questions that follow will be based on the information shared in the scenario. Grade 10, this is a very important aspect that I want you once again to keep in mind. If you do not know the definitions, the characteristics, the advantages and the disadvantages of the different forms of ownership, you will not be able to answer and apply your knowledge to scenarios. Okay, and once again, I spoke about this throughout our session. Make sure that you know this. Otherwise, you will find scenario-based questions very difficult to answer if you don't have that strong foundation of the basic knowledge that you need to know. Okay, so let's look at this scenario that I've included in this slide. I just want to once again put on my spotlight so that you can follow. Okay, let's read through it. So first of all, Simpiwe and Karabo wants to establish an information technology consultant business and name it Simpiwe and Karabo IT Consultants. Are mindful of the fact that they will be jointly and severally liable, very important, for the debt of the business. They agreed that each of them will contribute capital, skills and knowledge to establish to the establishment of the business. In return, they will share, very important, the profits and the losses of the business. Okay, so in this scenario, a lot of information is shared. Okay, and when you work through all the basic theory of forms of ownership, you will definitely be able to link certain things that was mentioned in the scenario. So let's look at a few questions based on this scenario. Identify the form of ownership that is applicable to S and K. So I'm going to ask you to make use of your hands. Okay, help me answer this question. So grade 10s, if you think this is a sole trader, please put up your hand. Let me see if there's anyone who thinks this scenario or this type of business they are explaining in the scenario will be a sole trader. Just put up your hand. Okay, let's try another form of ownership. Do you think this type of ownership mentioned in this business, and if we look at the different characteristics, will form part of a public company? Okay, I don't see any hands. That is very good news. Okay, and lastly, if you think this type of ownership can refer to a partnership, please put up your hand. Okay, definitely a lot of learners putting up their hands. Correct answer for this question will be a partnership. Okay, next question. Quote 3 characteristics of the form of ownership identified in question 1 from the scenario above. Okay, what are they asking us? Let's unpack this question. I want to put on the spotlight again. First of all, grade 10, before we get to the answer of this question, let's look at how they've stated this question. They are asking us to quote 3 characteristics from the scenario. Okay, so our answer should come from the scenario, and they only want 3 answers. Okay, I want you to take note of this, grade 10s. In a question paper or in a test or exam, when a question specifically asks you to discuss 2 advantages or name 3 disadvantages or whatever the case may be, if they specify the total number of answers that you need to give, and you write down, in this case, for example, you write down 4 characteristics, but the first 3 characteristics that you wrote down are incorrect, and the last one is the correct answer, a marker will still mark your last answer incorrect. Why? Why will they mark this incorrect? Because the question specifically asks you to provide only 3 characteristics, which will mean that the marker will mark the first 3 answers that you provided. And this looks like a simple thing that you should apply in your exam or in your test, but a lot of learners loses a lot of marks. And I see this when marking business studies exams and tests, that the first 3 answers or the first 2 answers are incorrect, and then the last answer they provided the correct answer. Unfortunately, that will not be marked correct. So please make sure that you do answer or write down your best 3 answers in this instance when answering your question paper. Okay, so now I talked a lot about how you should answer this question, but let's quickly again look at this question together. Quote 3 characteristics of the form of ownership identified in question 1. Form of ownership we identified was a partnership from the scenario above. So it's very clear that our answer should come from the given scenario. Okay, when we look at the 3 answers, you will see that everything is added to, comes from the scenario. So the first one is they are mindful of the fact that they will be jointly and severally liable for the debt of the business. Okay, they agree that each of them will contribute towards the skills, the capital and the knowledge to the establishment of the business. And finally, they also mention in return, they will share the profits and losses of the business. And this speaks to, these characteristics speaks to a partnership. Okay, let's look at a few more questions based on the scenario. Suppose Simpiwe wanted to start his own business without paying double tax. Name the form of ownership that will be suitable for Simpiwe and justify your answer. What do they want from us here? 2 aspects in these questions. In this question, firstly, they want us to name the form of ownership that will be most applicable, and then they want us to justify our answer. What does the word justify mean? We need to motivate why we are giving this answer. Okay, and in this case, grade 10s, when you have worked through all the basic characteristics, advantages and disadvantages, you will be able to answer this question accurately. So the answer for this question refers to a sole trader. Why? Because the owner only pays personal tax. Okay, and then they will not be paying double tax. Okay, so a sole trader in this instance will be the most applicable form of ownership. Then lastly, I included a question once again based on the scenario, and let's look at this. Advise Simpiwe on the impact, important, very important word of the form of ownership identified in question 3. So in question 3, the form of ownership we identified referred to a sole trader. But I want us, just before we answer this question, let's look at the word impact. Okay, when a question asks you in a test or in an exam to advise on the impact or explain the impact, this simply refers to answering in a way that you explain the advantages and the disadvantages. So what are they asking us over here? They are asking us to explain the impact, advantages, and the disadvantages of a sole trader. Sole trader comes from our previous question where we identified the relevant form of ownership. So make a note, please write this down. Impact refers to simply explaining the advantages and the disadvantages. Okay, very important that you know this. A lot of learners are not able to answer these type of questions just because they don't know what the meaning of impact is. Very important, grade 10s. Okay, here you will see I answered this question on the slide. So you will see once again in table format, an easy way to answer this type of question. I added the advantages of a sole trader and I added the disadvantages of a sole trader. Okay, and I would actually recommend that you answer these type of questions in a table in table format. It's easier for the marker to follow, and your questions is set your answer is set out very clearly. So grade 10s, when you answer these type of questions, try to use table format, and in some cases the examiner will state exactly what they want from you by explaining that answer this question in table format. Okay, and then you have to make sure that you make use of a table. Okay, is that clear to everyone? Remember, grade 10s, please add your questions. I can see there's quite a lot of questions coming through, so thank you for that. For the rest of you, please make sure that you just put up your hand. I just want to make sure that you are following and that you are finding working through these questions valuable. Okay, so just put up hands so that I can see everyone is still following. Great, thank you so much. Okay, so grade 10s, before I end the questions based on forms of ownership, this is what you can expect in a test or in an exam. Definitely a scenario-based question, wanting you to apply your knowledge to the scenario, taking the information from the scenario and answering questions accurately. So please make sure that you're able to do this. Just take note that forms of ownership can also be asked in an essay question. It can also be asked in multiple choice questions or match column A with column B. So it will not only be scenario based questions, but in most cases, I have seen that this is the way that they ask forms of ownership. Okay, and lastly, grade 10s, for those of you who have not downloaded the notes, or if you have a problem with downloading the notes now, take note of the following. Here is the link for the guided learning platform. There's the link, okay? And you can follow this link, and under the resources tab, you will find additional notes based on the sessions and the webinars that we are presenting, okay? So you can go to the guided learning platform. There's the link. It's also added in the handout box, and there you will find not only the presentation for the business studies that I'm presenting now, but for all the other webinar sessions, you will find the handouts as well as additional notes that have been set up. So please make sure that you go and follow the guided learning platform and follow the link that you're able to access these notes. Okay, I mentioned previously that I will also provide you with the recordings of the session, and this specific recordings with all the other webinar sessions that already has been presented are available on our YouTube channel. So this is the link that you can follow to get access to those recordings. Okay, if you have trouble signing in to our guided learning platform, please feel free to send us an email at info@impact.co.za, and we have a team that will be able to assist you so that you do get access to these notes. With this, also remember the previous exam papers that is available on the guided learning platform, very important for you to download. And you can use the example that I just made with the scenario that I included to go and practice this chapter's questions and to make sure that you have a very clear understanding of what they ask in an exam or in a test. Okay, and there's the link on the webinar recordings. So please feel free to go and visit these two platforms and make use of the information that was shared. Okay, any questions? So I'm going to allow for a few questions so that I can see what has been asked. In the meantime, please make sure that you work through all the information that I presented, and if you have any questions, please make sure that you send me an email to academics@impact.co.za, and I will definitely get back to you. Okay, so I have a few questions. Let's just quickly see. Okay, a lot of learners asking, can we receive this information in Afrikaans? Yes, you will definitely receive the information in Afrikaans. I will make it available, all the summaries, all the notes that I provided in English, I will make available in Afrikaans for the learners to go and download, and you will find this on the subject content folder under resources, additional resources on the guided learning platform. Okay, so you are more than welcome to, if you do not, if you don't have access to this, please make sure that you send me an email that I'm able to assist you. Okay, I am going to work through the questions after I've ended the session. Thank you so much to everyone who attended the session, and I hope you found the session valuable and that it contributes to you understanding this chapter. If you are not registered with Impact, please send us an email at info@impact.co.za. Thank you so much and have a lovely day.